The dust never settled for long out there, not in the canyon country of Utah, not in the red valleys of Wyoming, not in the hard-edged ridges of northern Arizona. A man could vanish in those places, and for nearly half a century, many did. Riders disappeared into the wilderness like phantoms, with nothing but the sound of hoofbeats behind them. One moment they were robbing banks or trains in broad daylight. The next, they were gone, slipping through a narrow draw, over a high pass, into a hollow you didn't know existed. The law would give chase for miles, until the trail went cold. Until they reached the edge of some broken bluff or dry basin and realized they weren't hunting criminals anymore. They were chasing ghosts. This wasn't luck. It wasn't magic. And it wasn't coincidence. It was the Outlaw Trail. Not a single road, not a marked path, but a living, breathing network of hidden passages, remote cabins, secret springs, and trusted allies. From the high plains of Montana to the deserts of northern Mexico, it sprawled across the spine of the American West, unwritten, ungoverned, and nearly impenetrable to outsiders. If you knew it, you could live free. For months, for years, sometimes for the rest of your life. If you didn't, you died. In the 1880s, the American West was in the middle of a violent transformation. The frontier was shrinking. Territories were turning into states. The U.S. Army had broken the back of most native resistance. Railroads were slicing through mountains and stretching across prairies. And the federal government was eager to impose order, on land, on people, on everything. But between the boom towns and the telegraph lines still lay thousands of square miles of harsh, rugged wilderness. No fences, no jurisdictions, no civilization. And into that void rode a different kind of man. Cattle rustlers, stagecoach robbers, train bandits, horse thieves, escaped convicts, deserters, fugitives from the East. Some were hardened killers. Others were just hungry. But they all had one thing in common. They needed to disappear. The Outlaw Trail didn't appear on maps. You couldn't follow it unless someone showed you. And even then, you had to earn it. You had to ride hard, sleep rough, know when to trust, and when not to. It wound through high desert basins, deep pine canyons, salt flats, badlands, and brush country. It relied on water holes, old game trails, ancient native footpaths. It passed through land most decent folks didn't travel, because decent folks didn't need to hide. But for those who did, it was salvation. At the center of this network were a few legendary strongholds, and none was more famous than the Hole in the Wall. Tucked deep into the Bighorn Mountains of northern Wyoming, the Hole in the Wall was exactly what it sounded like. A narrow pass in the rock, barely wide enough for a rider, leading into a hidden valley surrounded by sheer cliffs. There was one way in, and one way out, and if someone was watching the pass, you weren't getting through. Inside the valley there were cabins, hitching posts, spring-fed creeks, fire pits, caches of ammunition, and enough supplies to last through a harsh winter. It was a haven, but only for those who followed the code. That code wasn't written, but it was ironclad. You didn't bring heat on the hideout. You didn't talk about it to outsiders. You didn't steal from your own. And you didn't kill unless you had to. Men who broke the code didn't live long. Even outlaws had standards. Butch Cassidy understood that better than most. Born Robert Leroy Parker, he grew up a ranch kid in Utah Territory, poor, quiet, and smart. He didn't rob for fun, he didn't drink himself stupid, and he didn't shoot unless someone shot first. But when he formed the Wild Bunch, he built it around discipline. They studied train schedules, watched bank routines, planned routes, rotated hideouts. They'd hit a target in Colorado and scatter, some north to Montana, others west to Idaho, some south into Utah. Each man knew where to stop, which cabin to ride to, which settler to trust, which pass to take. They moved like smoke. The Pinkerton Detective Agency, America's most ruthless private lawmen, chased the wild bunch across 5 states and 2 countries. They interviewed townsfolk, turned old gang members, bribed sheriffs, posted reward posters from St. Louis to Santa Fe, but for years, they came up short. Because for every town that wanted Butch hanged, there was another that had fed him dinner. For every cabin burned, there were 3 more hidden in the hills. And for every route the Pinkertons traced, the wild bunch had 10 more to fall back on. The Outlaw Trail wasn't just a route. It was a living, breathing resistance. Down in Utah lay Robber's Roost, another infamous hideout. A sandstone labyrinth. Miles of twisting canyons. So narrow in places, you had to turn your saddle sideways just to pass through. No lawman ever reached it on horseback. Most gave up trying. But Butch knew it like the back of his hand. He'd stash stolen money there, wait out posses, rest his men. It was said that Robber's Roost could hide 30 riders without a single campfire being seen from a mile away. That was the trail's power. It made outlaws invisible. Another outpost was Brown's Park, straddling the Colorado-Wyoming-Utah border. It looked harmless, grassy, open, pastoral. But many of its settlers were outlaws themselves, retired riders, old rustlers, men who'd made peace with the law or just gotten too old to run. They knew who needed shelter, who'd knock at midnight, who needed a new horse, and they rarely asked questions, because if you were out there in the first place, you probably didn't want to talk. The Outlaw Trail worked because of loyalty, because of silence, because of shared need. A rancher might hide a fugitive for a night if he remembered what it felt like to run. A blacksmith might patch a shoe without asking how it broke. A storekeep might sell extra flour to a stranger if that stranger once paid his debt in silver coin. And a widow might look the other way when a tired man with a saddlebag full of money rode into her pasture, because the railroad had taken her land, and the outlaw, at least, left something behind. But it wasn't a dream. It wasn't romantic. Men died out there, starved, froze, got shot, betrayed, lost their minds in the wilderness. Some vanished for good. No grave, no name, just another skeleton bleaching in the dust. By the turn of the century, the trail was closing. Railroads cut through the old wilds, barbed wire boxed in open range. Lawmen got faster, telegraphs got louder, and the American government pushed west with finality. One by one, the hideouts fell. Some were burned, some were taken over by settlers, others just faded back into the stone and sagebrush. Butch and Sundance fled to South America. Some say they died in Bolivia. Others say Butch returned quietly years later and died under another name. No one really knows. But the trail that kept them alive, that hidden web of loyalty and land, was dying too. Today, if you ride deep enough into the high desert, you might still find traces. An old hitching post, a carved name in a tree, a crumbled chimney in a place too remote for any rancher to build. They're not marked, not maintained, but they're there, remnants of a time when men refused to be caught. The Outlaw Trail was never about glory. It wasn't about gold. It was about freedom, hard-won, fiercely protected, and always fleeting. For a few brief decades, the American West gave outlaws room to ride, and they took it. They rode through dust and danger, through hunger and fear, through heat and cold and silence. They rode beyond the reach of the law and into legend. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.